We're going to record what parataxis is again. Okay, our word of the day is parataxis. The definition is it's a term we use in poetry in which two images or fragments are juxtaposed without a clear connection. Parataxis. So the example is in your packets. It's this essay upstream. So I'm just going to read the first part of this essay and I'll show you where the parataxis is. So it says one tree is like another tree, but not too much. One tulip is like the next tulip, but not all together. More or less like people, a general outline and the stunning individual strokes. Hello, Tom. Hello, Andy. Hello, Archibald, Violet, and Clarissa Bluebell. Hello, Lily and Willow and Noah the oak tree. I have hugged and kissed every first day of spring for the last 30 years. And in reply, it's thousands of leaves tremble. What a life is ours. Doesn't anybody in the world anymore want to get up in the middle of the night and sing? Okay, so this is the beginning of an essay, not necessarily a poem, but this is a poet writing this essay, and she has juxtaposed just a little fragment of her poetry into the essay. So the first part is all about her like naming different things out in nature and saying, oh, what a life is ours, and hugging trees and all of that. And then the second part is this part about doesn't anyone in the world anymore want to get up in the middle of the night and sing? So the parataxis, the two different images are the hugging and kissing the trees juxtaposed with the singing in the middle of the night. So write down something like that in the example so that you can remember what this is. Just see. All right, so here we have this like intro. It's a little bit strange to have this be the introduction to an essay. It is definitely not straightforward at all. You're going to be reading this whole essay, so let's do a little bit of work together first to try and figure out what the argument is here, sort of at the beginning. By using parataxis, by juxtaposing these two images, what is she sort of bringing forth? So what happens when you use parataxis is that you have these two different images, right? And they on the surface don't have much to do with each other, but just by juxtaposing them, you're creating a meaning. Kissing and hugging trees has one meaning, just a hippie, you know. Getting up and dancing and singing in the middle of the night, that has another meaning. I don't know, what's that? An insomniac poet, I guess. And then you put those two together and it creates this third meaning when you juxtapose them together. And that's the meaning we're trying to get out of this. So what meaning does it create when she juxtaposes this fragment of poetry with the kissing and the hugging of the tree? What do you think she's trying to tell us here? Let's start with the kissing and the hugging of the tree. That's our first image. There's an oak tree named Noah that she has hugged and kissed every first day of spring for the last 30 years. And in reply, it's thousands of leaves tremble. What a life is ours. So what is that telling us about the ideal relationship that she envisions between people and nature? Yeah. Okay, cool. So love and respect as you would a family member. I like that. What else could we tell about hugging a tree, hugging and kissing a tree? Okay, so it's about like showing affection for nature. And how does nature respond to that showing of affection? This is the essay. What does the tree do? Yeah, it's like loves it, right? Yeah, so doesn't that tell us then that like nature also appreciates us? Like the way that she's describing it, it's like the tree is responding to her when she hugs the tree. The tree's like, oh, thanks, I needed that. It's really nice. So what does that tell us about then the relationship between the two of them? Like how are they alike and how are they not alike? The tree and the person. She want you all to go out and physically hug a tree. Maybe. I think it could be more symbolic than that, though. What does it mean to appreciate nature in the way that she's talking about it? Because there's all sorts of ways to appreciate nature. I can appreciate nature by donating to the National Wildlife Fund. I can appreciate nature by going on a hike. I can appreciate nature by being Henry David Thoreau and going and living in nature for 2 years. So what does she want us to do with nature in order to appreciate it? Crazy?
I just kind of like protect it and not like litter and destroy nature.
So I think she is talking about a kind of protection of nature, and I think she's talking about it in a really personal way. Luke?
Well, maybe like embrace nature.
Yeah. And so if you think about that as like a metaphor instead of literal, what does it mean to embrace nature metaphorically? Awesome. Okay. So like notice it. Right? That's the whole point of this first part is like name each part of it. Pay attention to every little part of it. Notice every single leaf that is like blowing in the wind, to actually touch nature and don't just take it for granted that it's around you. Okay, the second image that she's juxtaposing that with is this: doesn't anybody in the world anymore want to get up in the middle of the night and sing? What kind of tone do you think singing in the night takes right there in that little fragment of poetry? How would you describe her attitude towards it, Audrey?
Kind of like a freedom of being alone.
Yeah.
Like who you are when you're not with other people.
Okay, so it's like freedom of self, and she gets that through being alone. So that's the part about the middle of the night. That's particularly when you're going to get up and sing. Kaylee?
Every first day specific.
I love that. New markers. Spontaneous and embracing spontaneity, where this one is more about being planned. Okay, good. Anything else about singing in the middle of the night and what that would actually feel like, what she's trying to get you to do? Again, is she trying to get every single person to get up at 3 a.m. and just start singing? I don't think so. Maybe, again, like maybe she would appreciate that. I don't think she's against it. But what kind of attitude does that sort of like encourage in you? This feeling of spontaneity, this freedom of self. What else would be great about getting up in the middle of the night and singing? Brennan? Okay, good. What you want when you want it. Alistair? I think so too. This way of like kind of sloughing off all of society's conventions. Nighttime is when you're supposed to be asleep. You're not supposed to sing by yourself. You're supposed to sing with other people, right? And so it's just this like way of getting rid of society's expectations and doing what you want. Lexi? Okay, good. So it's disruptive too. Like if she does that and her husband is, in the bed next to her, he's going to be kind of upset about this. This is disrupting other people's sort of kind of way of doing things normally, traditionally. Yeah, Gracie?
And by saying like,
Can I call you Greasy? I'm sorry.
by saying like in the middle of the night, it's kind of like, you get to choose what time you want to do it at.
Yeah.
It's not like, I guess there's like midnight. That's like you can choose when the middle of the night is for you, because you can go to bed at a different time than everyone else. So midnight might be the start of your night.
Right. So it's like anytime. It's like you to have this ultimate freedom. Okay. So the parataxis happens when we put those two things together. So think about what both of these examples are emphasizing about how to be in the world. What do these two things have in common? I think it brings out their differences, but I also think it brings out their commonalities. What kind of person both embraces trees and gets up in the middle of the night and sings? Yeah.
I think someone that doesn't really care what other people think.
Uh-huh.
And kind of just is impulsive and acting on their own thoughts, not like what other people do. And they're kind of just embracing what they want.
Not acting on society's demands. They're acting on their whims, exactly. That is a whimsical person, for sure. Yeah, I feel like. Awesome. So it's like connecting through yourself through nature, and then also that would lead you to connect with nature. So it's this idea of if you follow your whims, you are a whimsical person and you get away from this thing and you do impulsive acts, you're going to find this sense of like a kind of like balance with everything around you, where you can celebrate nature and you can celebrate yourself at the same time. You gonna say something, Brennan? Okay, sorry. So do you notice here how it's like, well, no, I'm gonna leave it at that. Write down now under effects, what the effects of the Parataxis is. That's what I wrote down. I wrote down celebrates coexistence. I like that. Oh, sorry, Jesse. Yes, exactly. Exactly. I think you get that by putting the two things in juxtaposition. Parataxis. That's our word of the day, by the way. Here, I will write it in the top box. So this essay, we're going to read the rest of it. It's by Mary Oliver. Have you ever heard of Mary Oliver or read any of her poetry? She's maybe our most famous contemporary poet. She just passed away a couple years ago, but she kind of reached like the other poet that I want to compare her to is Robert Frost. Like in the 1950s, every single person knew about Robert Frost. And you kind of like, if you studied poetry at all, like you'd read Robert Frost poems, right? Mary Oliver is kind of that, but for our time period, so in like 20 years, everyone's going to be studying Mary Oliver like they studied Robert Frost, I think. She mostly writes poetry. She was our National Poet Laureate for many years, but she also wrote a book of essays, and this comes from a book of essays. The book of essays, I think, was also called Upstream. Yeah, Upstream. So this is the first essay in that collection, and this whole essay is about being devoted to something. This is, I chose this essay because I think it's a really good example of modern transcendentalism, and today is our last day with transcendentalism. We're going to move on to talking about race in America starting next time. So yeah, nothing controversial about that.
No.
So for our last day of transcendentalism, I want to think about where transcendentalism kind of ended up. And I think it ended up with people like Mary Oliver. So before we get into this, she's talking about what it means to be devoted to something and to have devotion. So with someone next to you, just one person would be fine. I want you to talk with someone next to you about what it means to be devoted to something. What would be your kind of definition of devoted? So Josie, for you, put your definition of devoted into the chat box.
It's like
Okay, now you have a blank spot on Mary Oliver's page. Write down your personal definition now. You kind of you talked it through with someone really quickly. Now write down your personal definition of what it means to devote yourself to something. What does it mean to be devoted? You're writing down your definition of what it means to be devoted. Grab the water. I will. All right. What does it mean to be devoted, according to you? Yeah, Lucy. Giving yourself up, you said? So when you give yourself up, what does that mean? To like, if you give yourself up, how does that work? Got it. So giving energy, and a large part of this is short term versus long term, and you're kind of sacrificing in the short term to create something important in the long term. Okay, Luke?
It's like a top priority.
All right, so it's something that is like a top priority to you. It's something you're devoted to. Okay? Yeah. Go ahead.
I said that it's like passionate about something.
Okay, so dedicated and impassioned, and it has to be about something with a purpose. Do you have an example of something then you can't be really devoted to if it doesn't have like a purpose? I'm trying to think. But like, okay, so I like just a snack. Like I love cookies or whatever. I could like dedicate a lot and I could be impassioned about cookies, right? But then I don't really have necessarily a purpose for eating them. It's just like pure pleasure. I just like the way they taste. So then I wouldn't be devoted to it. Would that be fair as like a distinction? Okay. Okay. What else should we add to this, Jenny?
I said to put your time and effort into something for an extended period.
Okay, so I like that, time and effort for an extended period of time. And why did you add the extended period of time part?
Because like if you're actually devoted to something, you're gonna get.
Yeah, so you can't just be devoted to something for a week. It's got to be something more long term. Okay, Austin?
I think that in some cases it's putting the time and effort to do like something for someone who loves you without like selfish motives.
Okay. So in some way, being devoted means that you have to be selfless towards that thing. What if it's like something though, like piano? I'm devoted to learning how to play the piano. Can I be, or does it have to be something selfless?
I think that it's only in like certain scenarios where it has to be selfless. Like
Okay.
if you're devoted to a relationship, like
Got it.
then I feel like it's more selfless sort of act.
Okay, good. So then we're looking at, there's different things. It could be like you're devoted to an action or an ideal or a person, but there's different ways that we can imagine what devotion looks like depending. Kaylee?
I think it's kind of similar to the in the moment you feel like, oh, I don't want to
happens to people when you devoted to like super side that self will
Yeah.
to not do it to fulfill it.
Okay, so it sounds like a huge part of it then is about a lot of what you guys are talking about, including what Kaylee just said, is it's about sacrifice. And sacrifice has this connection to selflessness. You might be seeing it as selfless and like, I'm gonna sacrifice the me who exists in this moment for the me who's gonna exist in the future. But either way, you're going to kind of give up some want for that moment. Yeah. So,
I think going off of that, like you can be committed to something, but then you can definitely be devoted. Like you can commit
oh,
to
okay.
like going through the motions of like say like a sport, like basketball, and you're just committed to being there, but devoting yourself actively taking time and effort and seeking like doing better.
Okay, it's active and requires improvement. I like that train of thought. Let's get one more comment on that. What's the difference between being committed and being devoted? Yeah, Audrey.
I just said like to be devoted is like to be completely immersed in the pursuit of the cause. So it's like it means more than like you're just committed.
Yeah. Like I can be committed to the school play because I'm going to be there every afternoon for the performance, right? But that doesn't mean I'm devoted to acting. It's not my greater purpose. It's not this pursuit and immersion. Okay, Bjorn?
I think commitment can be kind of more of like a surface level thing.
Ah.
Like, oh yeah, I'm committed to do this by this time or whatever. Or like, I'm not sure necessarily, but like, kind of like, I think a commitment is more like, yeah, I'll do that eventually, or something like that. But like devoting to a cause is like, I'm starting this right now.
Got it. So
Whatever it is.
yeah, it's like your whole being has to be devoted to it. It can't just be sort of like sometimes I go here and sometimes I go there. It's not according to Woolf.
Yeah.
Aline?
It just add on to being like, for example, have you ever heard whenever they talk about cults, when they talk about politics, they talk about devotion. So adding on to you're devoted, but it's not.
Yes, okay, so it's like if you're actually going to be devoted to versus to something, now I'm getting really confused about how to talk about devotion. If you are actually devoted to something, you can't just be partially devoted to it. Does that mean you can't have multiple devotions? Like, can I not be devoted to both my husband and teaching? Do I have to choose one or the other? Sometimes it feels like I do. Okay, so Elia, you're saying no, you gotta have full devotion. One thing. Oh, you can do you can have multiple things that you've committed to. Okay. Elsa?
I think we could put this actually,
Okay.
they actually can't be
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Most people feel like the opposite. So they feel like have this as a goal. Like if you're like if you want to have a good life, you don't want to have a job, probably want to be those are the goals. And I feel like they can all work together.
Okay, so then you're talking about devotion being more, like you said, just more overarching sort of purpose or ideal. Like you're saying you can't actually be devoted to a job then?
I think you can, but there's like so many
Okay.
you be devoted to
Yeah, it's more about this overarching, here's what I think a good life is, and I'm devoted to that good life.
yeah.
Okay. Sadie,
I don't know why I can say anything, but
you can say things.
Okay. Anyway, I think devotion and commitment are different. Like, I feel more like you committed to this, it's a rule. And committed feels like a rule, and devotion feels like something that you want.
Okay, so it has to be internally motivated. Devotion cannot be externally motivated. And I think parents are learning that every day as you grow up, right? That whatever they're devoted to or want you to be devoted to, it has to come from within you to actually be devotion. Otherwise, it might just be commitment to the thing. Okay, here's what we're going to do. You are now going to read upstream silently to yourself. It's not very long. It's very poetic. I think it'll take us, I don't know, about 10 minutes to read it because you kind of have to read it carefully to figure out what she's saying. So it goes all the way to page 47. You see this part that's like all big. That's just the end of it. It just copied this way. So you're going to read 44 to 47. And at the end of it, you're trying to figure out what her argument is. We started this conversation about devotion because you'll notice the very last line of her essay is, attention is the beginning of devotion. And I want you to figure out what she is trying to say about devotion in this little essay. And if you get done reading it before everyone else, you can write down what you think her thesis statement is at the end. Yeah. Or just use this. write it as one sentence, as a thesis statement. Don't have an argument written down yet. And if you already have, really refine that. I'm gonna have your partners deciding whose is better. Show off yours. Okay, with a partner, I want you to share what you think the thesis statement is, what you think the argument is, and in your partners, decide which one of you has the better written argument. So the key here is you're looking for precision and you're looking for grammar, like you're looking that it's written well. So decide among the two of you who has the better one, and I want you to have a really good answer for why they have the better one. Okay.
Like mine, I said, once you really see the world from what it's
Someone that you hate, showing you their voice, right? Getting like someone's big, be confident, argue for yours. You believed in it at one point.
At one point. As we're trying to connect and value nature, we cannot be passive about it. Okay, I love this idea of active versus passive. And now I want you to clarify what you mean by the word connect. So connect is such a tricky, vague word. It could mean physical connection. It could mean relating to something. It could be linked. It could be inspired by. Like there's so many different ways to read that word. So see if you can figure out what she actually wants you to do in nature.
You're right. It's not creating sense. Basically, like it's so much. You could find I'm sorry. You know, like, oh, I don't, yeah, no, I get it. Better one?
Come on up and put your foot here, Allison.
Hey,
Do you guys know which one's the better one? I hope
Yeah, ours is good.
Oh, okay. This one.
It was.
Okay, I think we got enough people up here writing it.
What was it again?
Yeah. I just.
What the heck?
Lefty game.
I'm taking derivative of the composite function.
That does not give me.
Eternal purposes, Matthew? Purposes?
Yeah.
I'll be on the Zoom. Gentry goes, 47 on the Yeah, I got a 26.
I was like, the average is 21. I was like, no, that's low. Like 25.
That's fine. I think it's a big deal. Times the original function times the derivative of the entitled chapter, right? So that should work then. Because one
Really good all together.
I know, that's what I'm thinking, like, I might ask you
that would be
that.
negative.
Not that. I don't know.
Go, Alistair. What is this? She's tearing these apart.
We will get nothing. It was just like slime face. No, I should like. No. We'll get a slime. No, but it's a piece of stain. It's supposed to be. It's like specific.
She is ripping these to pieces. I'm so glad I didn't write mine up there.
Oh wait, give me a second. Yeah.
Decide for yourself. That's because it's just trash.
You messed up.
I don't know why.
No, you didn't.
Well, I feel like that.
Like the voice. Now you're actually
That seems myself.
Okay. So, what I've tried to do up here is I've tried to get you to focus these a little bit more and to be a little bit more precise. So if you didn't put yours up here, that's okay. You're taking inspiration from this. So we spent so much time figuring out what devotion was to us, and Mary Oliver is spending this whole essay figuring out what devotion is to her. So anytime you're using the word devotion without actually saying what devotion is, it means we're missing the argument. So we got to figure out what it means to be devoted to oneself, or what devotion actually is. Is it the same as passion for Mary Oliver? And if so, what is that definition? Here it's like, decide for yourself what one will be devoted to. Again, what's devotion? And following that. And do we mean like physically following, or is there something like more precise we could say there? Save our lives and nature, we must love them. So when I think about saving nature, I'm thinking about like conservation, like don't step in, don't like deforest the forest, don't cut down the forest and so on. Is that the same thing as saving our lives? Like, are we talking about literally saving lives, like so we don't choke on pollution, or are we talking about something more spiritual? Here they had a slash, so I'm going to force you to choose and or. And then I say conscientious of it, and here, this one's such a good one here. You cannot be devoted without first concentrating or paying attention to the thing which you seek to understand. You must be conscious of it. So my question for this one is, what's the consequence of this? Are we conscious of it and that leads us to devotion, or are we conscious of it and that leads us to understanding? Like, what's the relationship between devotion and understanding? Then we've got devotion is natural. Do you mean like it's inevitable, like everyone's devoted to something? I wasn't quite sure. And so it should be nourished from a young age. Here I want us to figure out, she's talking about how it should be nourished. Here we say we should focus our notice and attention on knowing ourselves and how we fit in the world. Again, is that a literal thing that we're saying that? And then in order to have the devotion, what is devotion again? To be devoted, you first have to see something that you need to be devoted to. So here I'm asking, what does she think is worthy of our devotion? And then here, we need to devote ourselves to eternal purposes instead of temporal commitments. I really like that, but I want to know why. What's in it for us to do that? Okay, so I did this to show you how we can improve the sentences, everyone's.
Yeah.
I think this one's best. Sorry, but I think this one's the second best. If I'm being honest.
We'll take.
Totally honestly. Okay, so now I want you to revise your thesis with your partner this time. So you chose which one was the best, now revise it. Deeper understanding behind nature by exploring it for ourselves. So I would probably edit this to say deeper understanding of nature, unless you're trying to say she wants us to understand the processes that goes into building nature, and that's something different, I think. Okay, so here's what I want you to figure out. I think this word deeper, it's a metaphor. When we have a deep understanding, nothing is actually like deep in our brains. In fact, it's probably on the outside of our brains, which is where thinking happens, like that cortex, Sorry, I don't know anything about neuroscience, so I'll shut up about that. But deeper is a metaphor. So you want to figure out what it is she wants us to understand about nature. Is she wanting us to understand its scientific purposes? Does she want us to understand how it survives? She seems to be thinking a little bit about like the personification of nature. So there is something about the way that you can understand nature the same as you can understand humanity in this essay. So see if you can be a little bit more specific about this idea of what deeper understanding is.
So the devotion she wants is for them to like love it and to like be in it and to like have it tangible.
Because
What's that word? What's that?
Yeah, our
There it is.
I didn't have this water tank, I was the only girl in our team.
I know, because I'm like.
I always put my next picture
Okay, so we got. Knowing yourself.
I've got if there was something about it, I have to
Higher power.
So that makes zero sense.
Yeah.
Oh wait, actually.
When the guy's doing
What?
Okay, I think.
So you read sauce.
Are we supposed to read right? It's like a weight belt.
Lauren, do you guys have one right? Still working on it? Luke, do you guys have one right? Okay. Does anyone have theirs done? You wanna come up and put it up for me? I'm just gonna have a couple of you come put it up this time. Callie, will you come do it? Okay. Let's get one more. Lexi, do you guys have one? Will you guys come and put one up? All right, okay, let's. I won't rip these apart, I promise. We're gonna praise these. Unless they're bad. Unless they're really bad. If the marker sits from it, I'll go for that one.
Yeah.
You are a good writer. I'm just looking for something very specific. I think part of that shit is like, teaching an artist all that students, so now you gotta get it right on test. Probably.
I did really well with the top last year, but this year
In terms of like getting stuff turned in, or in terms of like your work?
I understood
No, I'm just very, a lot
I was
harsher.
like, I feel like I'm not doing well anymore.
No,
I was like, I used to get A's on my C's, now I get the C's. This is a big.
no, that's normal, that's, yeah.
I do it good.
Or maybe it's a thought. Oh, because
Minus the
where I, oh.
I like know what I want to say to some degree, but then I'm like, no, I don't.
All right, we're gonna vote on which one you like the best. So,
Where does that work?
we should focus our notice, right? And attention on knowing ourselves and balancing our connections to society and nature in order to sacrifice of ourselves to a higher purpose in the act of true devotion.
Wait.
I'm gonna give you a second to look at it. Oh,
It doesn't make sense.
okay. To save the joy we find in life and the joy we can find in nature, we first have to be devoted to them.
Yeah, what, why?
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 Devoting yourself to something creates passion,
Which life worth living?
which life worth living.
Rita.
Am I right? Makes,
Yeah.
okay, which makes life worth living. Okay, read these through again, decide here, just for yourself. Which one do you think is best? 1, 2, or 3? We're gonna take votes here in a second.
Doesn't make sense.
Oh, Josie, this is so good.
I like the simplisticness of 3.
Yes, yes, it's so good. I wish you were here. We put yours up.
I feel like just read hers to us.
Yeah, I bet Josie's absolutely goated.
Oh. Josie's is really good, so we're gonna read it. It says, it's very long. You ready?
Oh gosh.
It says, her goal is for us to use nature to help us understand where we belong in regards to our society or the world. Her constant metaphors and comparisons throughout the essay show this. That part wouldn't be part of the thesis, but I believe she wants to almost personify nature ourselves in order to do this, and that's why we need to find a meaning behind it. It's less scientifically based and more of an influence kind of thing. By doing this, it helps us to respect nature more and in a way that helps us respect ourselves more. So I think that she's got the idea, and then she would take out all of that extra wording. Sorry, Josie, they made me do this. Take out all that extra wording, and you would get that thesis down really
Yes.
solidly.
That was cool.
But out of the ones up here on the board, how many would vote for 1 being the best? Okay, how about 2? Okay, and how about 3? Okay, I think it's between 1 and 3, and I think 1 kind of wins. Okay, so it's not perfect. Writing rarely is, especially writing you have to do in like 3 minutes, like you did.
Yes.
What do you like about this one, though?
I like those not it like dives deeper into like why and what. And although I love the simplicity of it, that's what I chose. I think 1 is good because it isn't just surface level. You know?
Okay, so right here, the sacrifice to a higher purpose is kind of the what of devotion, right?
Yeah.
Devotion means this thing. Okay, yeah, Leah?
I like the balancing our connections with my nature idea because she talks a lot about like metaphors and she talks about like society and nature. So I think that balancing like you can't be off the chart and just like an asylum, but also you can't be influenced by society.
So it's like they're getting at this idea of this is how we know ourselves through this balance of nature and society, and wherever that balance is happening in our own sort of identities, that's where ourselves lie. I like that idea too. All right, what could we fix about this thesis statement though?
It's long.
Your handwriting is fine. It is a little bit long, but it's okay for it to be long as long as it's grammatically like streamlined. And here I think we could make it a little bit more grammatically streamlined. Like we could say, we should focus our attention, because notice and attention I think are pretty much the same thing. Would you agree with that? Who wrote that one? The 3 of you? The 2 of you. Okay. All right, cool. So we should focus our attention on knowing ourselves and balancing our connections to society and nature. To me, it feels like we know ourselves through balancing society and nature. So if we said we focus our attention on the balance between society and nature, we come to know ourselves. That might be a little bit more streamlined. And then it says, in order to sacrifice of ourselves, sacrifice ourselves to a higher purpose in the act of true devotion. I don't know if there's any difference between devotion and true devotion, because devotion is already a word that implies truth, I think. And then I might just flip some things around and I'd play with the wording, but I think the idea here is really solid. And I want you to notice the one that we chose was the one that had like kind of the most parts to it. It's when we read it out loud, it does sound a little bit convoluted, right, in the language itself, but the ideas are all there. And that's the important part about figuring out what someone's thesis is you want to encompass the entire thesis, the whole of the essay, and you don't want to simplify it just for the sake of like brevity or like a pithy statement. Okay, the reason we're doing this is the AP test makes you do this. So I'm going to give you an example from the AP test. And you can go back to your seats if you want to, where the rest of the time is just us. Abby. Abby.
Are we gonna write on this?
You can write on this, yes.
But are
Yeah?
we gonna write on it?
Yeah.
He's gonna write his calculus.
I will use every.
Oh my gosh, Utopia? That is so fun.
No, it's about race.
Oh, yeah. Transcendentalism.
All right, does everyone have one now? Okay. Josie doesn't have one. Sorry, I'm gonna add you. 1 second. I'm going to add you to the Canvas assignment for today, just so that you have access to the file. You don't need to do anything on that assignment, and I will take you off right after class. But you need the Woolf. Okay, so under the module for today, there's an assignment called Class Recording, September 20th and 21st, and it has the Virginia Woolf prompt on that. Okay. Let me get your attention. Let me get your attention. Okay. So this would be an example of the rhetorical analysis question on the AP test. And so far, I haven't had you writing rhetorical analyses. We are going to get into that in our next unit. You're going to write a whole bunch of them. Don't worry. But for this unit, I've been having you write summaries because what I've noticed is the hardest thing sometimes for students to do, it's not to write about the language choices and about how they're persuasive. It's just to nail down what that argument actually is. Because sometimes you get prompts like this Mary Oliver essay, and they say, what is she arguing in this? And sometimes you're going to feel like totally lost because it's this piece of creative writing and you're thinking, I don't know that there's an argument here, and you've got to make one. So that's why I've been having you do these summary assignments. You're looking for implied arguments, and you're trying to be as precise and as explicit as you can about what that argument is. So this comes from Virginia Woolf's Memoirs. It says, just in the prompt here, it says she reflects upon her childhood summers spent in a seaside village in Cornwall, England. Read the passage carefully, then write an essay in which you analyze how Woolf uses language to convey the lasting significance of these moments from her past. And what it is asking you to do on every rhetorical analysis is find the argument and explain how she is persuading her audience with this argument. So I'm going to read this one out loud to you. And while I'm reading, you can write all over this. You're trying to find, what do you think her argument is in this little piece? All right. Better than these walks, a treat announced perhaps once a fortnight was an afternoon sailing. We would hire a lugger. The fishermen went with us. But once Thoby was allowed to steer us home. Show them you can bring her in, my boy, father said with his usual trust and pride in Thoby. And Thoby took the fisherman's place and steered, flushed with his blue eyes, very blue, and his mouth set. He sat there, bringing us round the point into harbor without letting the sail flag. One day the sea was full of pale jellyfish, like lamps with streaming hair, but they stung you if you touched them. Sometimes lines would be handed us, baited by gobbets cut from fish, and the line thrilled in one's fingers as the boat tossed and shot through the water. And then, how can I convey the excitement? There was a little leaping tug, then another. Up one hauled, up through the water at length came the white twisting fish and was slapped on the floor. There it lay, flapping this way and that in an inch or two of water. Once, after we had hung about, tacking and hauling in gurnard after gurnard, dab after dab, father said to me, "Next time you're going to fish, I shan't come. I don't like to see fish caught, but you can go if you like." It was a perfect lesson. It was not a rebuke, not a forbidding, simply a statement of his own feeling, about which I could think and decide for myself. Though my passion for the thrill and the tug had been perhaps the most acute I then knew, his words slowly extinguished it, leaving no grudge. I ceased to wish to catch fish. But from the memory of my own passion, I am still able to construct an idea of the sporting passion. It is one of those invaluable seeds from which, since it is impossible to have every experience fully, one can grow something that represents other people's experiences. Often, one has to make do with seeds, the germs of what might have been, had one's life been different. I pigeonhole fishing thus with other momentary glimpses, like those rapid glances, for example, that I cast into basements when I walk in London streets. Okay, so it doesn't have anything to do with transcendentalism. I wouldn't call this piece transcendentalist. It is, though, poetic in the way that sometimes the transcendentalists were. So I'm going to have you now at the bottom of this, same as you did with Mary Oliver, but hopefully this time more precise. You're going to write what you think Virginia Woolf's argument is in this little passage. Raise your hand if you've got an argument written down. All right, one more minute till we're all there. Okay, same as before. We're not going to put them on the board this time, but same as before. You're talking with that partner. I lied about not talking with the partner anymore. And you're gonna decide which one is the best and advocate for your own, like you believe in it, advocate for which parts of your own thesis work really well. Okay. Just see if you would put yours in the chat box again.
And the other one was through your use of comparisons and storytelling. I feel like I could add on top, and I feel like because they talk about right here, it says like it's not different, not simply saying that it's like very devout to think the side of the reason. I feel like that would be I think there could be more container. I feel like if you read it in a different way, because there's like different lenses that you read through it, and so I think they would both be argued good. I exactly they feel like my parents like remind me yeah, I know. I think where you would
Okay, oh, mine got covered up. I wrote the thesis that I had for this up on the board, and now you can't read it, but it says, small moments of ambiguous pleasures can create rich memories, which a writer can then extrapolate to create empathy. I think that this little piece is about writing. I think it's her explaining how she can take one thing that one person experienced and kind of create something wider from that. She says, it is one of those invaluable seeds from which, since it is impossible to have every experience fully, one can grow something that represents other people's experiences. So when I want to write about this, I'm going to focus on this argument about growing this seed of other people's experiences. And the focus there is on her experience. So if you didn't say anything about writing, that's totally fine. But for me, I'm like, oh, this kind of explains what it means to be a writer, to take that one little bit of somebody's experience and grow it like this. So that was the thesis I came up with. The key, though, is to just be precise about your terms. So making sure that you're really fully explaining each part of it and making sure that it's visible. So that's where we're going to end with this learning how to write about arguments and transcendentalism unit. We're going to end with an assignment. So I did change the due date for this assignment today. Yeah, I moved it into the future. It's for you guys, it's due September 30th. Yeah, so it's not due by next time. So, oh, that's great. So I was hoping that you looked forward to this. I mean, not looked forward like, oh, I'm so excited, but like looked into the future to see this assignment. But basically what you're doing All right, let me explain it. Okay, what you are doing is you are comparing. Stop, everyone stop talking. Okay. You are comparing the Scarlet Letter to Transcendentalism. So in some ways, the Scarlet Letter is very representative of Transcendentalism ideals. In other ways, it is definitely not. There are lots of things in the book that don't really fall into line with Transcendentalism. For example, Hester, like sort of believing that she was actually a sinner and feeling like it was her responsibility to carry that Scarlet A. That's not really a Transcendentalist idea, right? And yet there's also Pearl, who is like the new sort of, exciting element that comes out of that she is totally representative of a transcendental ideal. So you're going to choose one theme in the novel that seems to fit with one tenet or seems to contradict one tenet of Transcendentalism. And I've got all of the details here about how to do this assignment. I even take you through step by step the order that you should do it. And then ultimately the essay is very short, just 2 to 3 pages MLA. On that same scale as usual, but here, this is really important. Direct evidence from the Scarlet Letter and direct evidence from the Transcendental packet, which means that you've got to be quoting some Transcendentalists and some Scarlet Letter in order to make your argument. So that's the assignment. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Oscar. Yes, an excellent question. Yeah, so for you guys, that will be due September 30th, 7 a.m. As usual, I would love if you printed that, and I will grade the printed essays first. Okay, can we be done with Transcendentalism then? Yes. Are you all Transcendentalists? Really?
No, now she talks about nature. No, it was so weird.
She was a weirdo?
No, she literally So since it's due on the 30th, does that mean rewrites would be due on
October 8th, because it'll be end of term. So you'll have a shorter amount to rewrite it. Yeah. I want to hear about the sub-bit in a minute. Okay, so we're gonna move on. We've still got 10 minutes of class.
Did you want these turned in?
No, keep them in your binders. Keep those Virginia Woolf things in your binders. Civil rights rhetoric. All right, let me get your attention. We are going to now move on to talking about rhetoric, not just talking about argument, but actual persuasive strategies. So we've got this tried and true rhetorical triangle that we need to talk about.
Writer, audience.
So I know that you remember this. I know that you remember this from last year, but I still want you to take some notes on this. So in your binders and lines of paper, I want you to make sure you've got the rhetorical triangle written out.
Miscellaneous.
Yeah. Oh, you're right.
Oh, we did
right.
learn this.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna do it in a different order.
Logos, ethos, pathos.
No, different. I'm gonna explain it in a different way. Okay.
Audience,
paths.
writer.
Yeah.
How do you say it backwards?
I'm so
Okay, everyone there? So the rhetorical triangle, this describes a situation that everyone who is trying to write a persuasive piece of writing has to figure out. They have to figure out what their position is as a writer, first of all. What kind of thing, what argument am I trying to convey to my audience? For this one, let's do school uniforms. All right, so let's say I am trying to convey, I believe strongly that we should have school uniforms at school. Everyone should be wearing all black. I just think
Terrible.
everyone wears, no, everyone wears our school colors. They all have, you know, like the khaki pants and the polo shirt every day. That's me. Let's say I am trying to convince someone of this. Now, I could try to convince you guys. That'd be great. If the students were demanding their own uniforms, that's great. But if we are being honest, you guys don't have a whole lot of power in that scenario. If you're, well, let me ask you, who has the power in that scenario?
The principal.
Okay, maybe the principal. So it might be Mr. Kornberg that wants to implement dress codes, right? If he got up on the announcement and said, hey, next week, we're doing school uniforms. Who would, the students might be mad, yeah, but who else would be really mad? Parents in school. Okay, so technically the school board does have to make those kinds of decisions legally, right? But who does the school board listen to? Parents. School board listens to the parents above all. That's who is in charge of schools. If anyone tries to tell you the principal's in charge or teachers in charge, that's not true. It's parents that are in charge of schools. So over here, I'm going to try and figure out my audience. So my writer, that's me in this case. My audience, parents at Harriman. Brennan?
If all like the students just show up next week anyway. Like the students show up at
Good
the
point.
school with their clothes normal.
Good point. Maybe there's got to be some orders. Maybe it's got to go parents first. I convince the parents, and then we've got to convince the students to have this buy-in. Because you guys could revolt. Yeah, let's revolt. Yeah, like beautiful. Yeah, and the students then are going to have to buy in at all if they don't want to make the admin's job miserable. Okay, cool. I'm gonna just start with parents though. I'm gonna narrow it down to that because that's what I think, that's who I think I need to actually start with. I think they're the ones who can then petition the school board and they're the ones who are gonna actually have to buy the uniform. So I want them to be on board. And then the last thing is I need to figure out how I'm going to structure my argument, the subject of my argument. There are a lot of different reasons to have uniforms. Let's do this really quickly. We're gonna do a longer one next time, but reason to have uniforms. Okay, ultimately saves money. You know, you only need a few of them. They're cheap clothes. You don't have to worry about buying like the nice clothes for your kid anymore. Ultimately, this is gonna save money. I think it's nice that it creates a kind of school culture. Okay, I'm gonna make you argue for school uniforms. Don't worry, I'm not gonna hold you to it. I don't really care about uniforms, Claire. I'm better academically. All right, good. Yeah, Austin.
There's less stress about judgment from other people.
So less stress about other people judging. That might have an E. Yeah. Okay, so dress code becomes less about like modesty and more about actual like real things. Like that's what I think sounds appealing. It's like you're either wearing khakis or you aren't. It's not like, oh, there's 2 inches of belly showing and you're only allowed 1 inch or whatever, you know. So it gets away from some of those tiny like little weirdnesses that happen between students and teachers on that issue. What else would be a good reason for uniforms? Yeah. Awesome.
I feel like the thing I like most about it is when I woke up in the morning, I didn't have to I think I got up the door a lot quicker because I was just like didn't care as much. You don't think about it. Like I don't care that much now anyway. It's just so easy and fast in the morning. It's just like damn, like I'm done, you know?
Yeah, so it's like more efficient. Maybe we'd have fewer tardies because of it.
Probably.
All right, any other reasons for uniforms that we can think of? I don't know, they can be kind of cute, can't they?
No.
Oh, like I'm watching Gilmore Girls right now and Rory looks so cute in her school uniform.
No.
Cute top.
Yeah, top one. No, I just was trying to fit it in. Okay,
Cute place.
so we're looking at all of our different reasons why school uniforms might be appropriate in our high school, right? What could be a good reason? And I'm trying to figure out, I've got my narrow writer, it's me. I've got my narrow audience, parents at Harriman High School. Now I need to think of my narrow subject. I could write a paper where I talk about every single one of these things, but it's going to end up being this kind of list of things. Well, we've got this and this and this, and it's not creating this cohesive argument. So a writer will choose which subject is going to speak the most to the audience. So which one of these do you think is going to be most appropriate for our audience of parents at Harriman High School?
Save money.
Live better.
Walmart.
Claire, what do you think?
Well, I think there's two saves money, especially.
Okay.
Also, they want their kids to do well in school.
Okay, do you think that the school cares about you, or do you think parents care about you having a unified school culture?
No.
Like maybe a little bit. I'm not saying they don't care about that, but that isn't their primary concern, right? They're not really caring if you're Tenley's parents, they're not really caring if Matthew succeeds in school. They're caring if Tenley succeeds in school, right? And they don't want Matthew to bully Tenley. That's important. But ultimately, the purpose of school, I just like that picture. That would never happen. The purpose of school is for individual growth in each student, right? So they're not really caring about this. Do your parents care if you look cute?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's really nice. Mine does.
They do not care.
They probably care about your stress and your judgment
Only a little
about being
bit.
judged, but probably in as much as it affects your performance. So I think these two do work for this. Yeah.
I would say that it'd be better to argue about saving money than about performance academically.
Okay, that was
because,
my question.
It's really easy to point out that there's only correlation between performing better academically, and usually the reason that I think it is that they perform better academically, because those are usually also schools that are private schools or charter schools, and they have a different system and better teachers.
I could see that. Okay. So
And
then
people are
ultimately,
cheap. So therefore,
if we're going for like the hard facts, this is going to be the easier one to show our parents. Also, our parents are interested in saving money. That's just the nature of being a parent, right? So then subject saves money. And we're going to narrow, oh, my pen is gone. We're going to narrow our focus on that subject. So everything that happens inside this rhetorical triangle concerns all three of these factors. Okay, we'll get to logos, ethos, and pathos next
oh
time.
my gosh.
So you actually don't have homework for next time anymore. I know, this class is getting too easy. So,
No,
I love this class. So look ahead to that Scarlet letter essay. Don't let that one like get you by surprise, because it's gonna be some work to find all your evidence. Okay,
My last session was pretty good.
this class is?
You know what's majoring AP stats.
Oh. Oh, okay, that's exactly what I want to hear.
Like, it's just like stumping you because it's like expanding on things I wouldn't even thought. Not like
Yeah, not like I hate it, I'm so bored.
AP stats just makes me feel stupid.
Oh, no, you'll get it. Stats, you'll get it. All right, Josie.